watch Kansas. I'm David French, the state representative for the 40th District, and I'm joined today by Dave Beeler, who is running for that position since I'm retiring this year. So Dave, welcome to Watch Kansas, and our goal today is to introduce you to the viewers. Can you give us a brief description of yourself and where you've been and what you're doing, and who is Dave Beeler?
Sure. Again, thanks for having me, David.
Sure.
I'm Dave Beeler. I'm running for Kansas House of Representatives for the 40th District. And my wife Lisa and I came to this community in 1984 and raised our family here and have been a part of this community, Leavenworth and Lansing, since then. And what is unique and maybe a little bit about me is the fact that I spent 36 years working for Hallmark Cards, 25 years of which was here in the Leavenworth community, both at the Hallmark Cards plant and at the Select Products plant. 10 years at the corporate facility, and in that span, in a variety of positions. So that's one body of work that I have. The second part of that, though, is my Navy career. Commissioned as an ensign in 1994 and just retired as a captain in 2020, May of 2020. And for those of you who may be interested in what a captain is in the Navy, as opposed
It's not an Army captain.
It's not an Army captain. No, it's a big captain. And so it's the
colonel equivalent in the Army.
Colonel equivalent, or as we say, a colonel is a captain equivalent in my service.
Oh, okay.
So again, there's the Hallmark experience, there's a Navy experience, but being part of this community, for me, this is where my family grew up, and we raised our kids. They went to Lansing High School.
And you have how many kids?
I have 3 children. All of them are adults. Have two granddaughters from my daughter. But in the course of the last 36 years, I was on the Alliance Against Family Violence's board of directors for a total of 14 years, I think.
That's good.
I think my service with the Alliance ended with my last deployment to Kuwait. Also on the St. Francis de Sales Pastoral Council and Finance Committee for about 10 years. And when my kids were little, I coached them in every sport they were in, and I'll say this again, except basketball, because I'm a terrible basketball player and I'm not very tall. But did coach wrestling, football, baseball, t-ball, and had a blast with it. And then, of course, was also involved in scouting with my 2 sons. So that commitment to this community is what I bring, and then I bring with that my Hallmark and my Navy experience. So that's me.
That's you. That sounds like quite a resume you have there, and I think we can all appreciate that. That's a full life already, and so you've now decided to jump into being a legislator or trying to be a legislator. I noticed on that you have a campaign motto of proven leadership. Can you go on and explain a little bit more what you mean by that and how you can use that in a position in the legislature?
Sure. And that goes a little bit back to when I was talking about who I am. My combined Hallmark experience, and again, at Hallmark, I started out as a section manager or a shift supervisor, and worked my way up in this community to the plant production manager twice. And in that capacity, I was responsible for both the Hallmark Cards and the Select Products facility, and managed 900 people. All of the production operations rolled up under me. So it was hiring, it was staffing, it was production schedules, all those things.
Everything that has to do with leadership. I understand.
Absolutely. And it's a tremendous responsibility. I grew a lot in that, and I learned from a lot of people. And then on the Navy side, again, I was commissioned as an ensign and retired as a captain. And in that capacity, I had a variety of staff jobs, from operations, mostly in logistics. But I also was selected for commanding officer billets 6 times, twice as a lieutenant commander, twice as a commander, and twice as a captain. And the Navy has, I'm sure it's like the Army, when you first become a commanding officer, you have to read and understand what's called the charge of command. And in that capacity, you are not only responsible for the mission, you're responsible for each and one of your sailors, for their professional development, for their training, for for establishing the right ethical leadership, and everything in between. And it's a tremendous responsibility. It's one of the most awesome experiences I've ever had. And when I look at those 2 things, when I look at the Navy experience and I add that to the Hallmark experience, that is the proven leadership I'm talking about. And if you look at my yard signs, at the bottom it says a lifetime of leadership. And that's what I bring to this job. And and as the next legislator for the 40th district.
I know that I've learned that having good leadership in our government is so critical, and unfortunately we don't have enough good leaders. Often we have followers that don't mind following somebody else but won't step up and be leaders, and so I think that skill set that you're bringing can be invaluable to the legislature. This is your first time in to run for public office, I believe, and so I'm sure this has been an eye-opener for you.
Yes, it has.
Can you explain a little bit about, I mean, you're 3 months into the campaign, you got another 2 months before the general election, so can you kind of explain what you've learned as far as what it takes to be campaigning for a position like this, and what kind of surprises have come along since you started this back in May? I'm sure you've been surprised many times of the things that have come up that you weren't expecting. So kind of talk a little bit about your campaign so far and how it's going.
It's funny you mention that because before I jumped into this with both feet, my family were asking me, what are you going to do after the Navy? And I always say, I'm going to figure this out. And at one point I was thinking about having a summer vacation until David and I started talking about this opportunity. And I realized very quickly that given my background, given the things that I'm passionate about, that I can do this job and I can do it well. What I didn't have at the time, and again, it was pretty short notice, or as we would say in the military, it was a short fuse kind of thing. It was, I can do the job, but what I need around me is I need a team that can help. I need a team that has done the campaigning part. I know at some point I'll be learning the legislative process, but what I needed was a team that could help me understand everything from here's how you map out the campaign so many months out. Here's what you have to do for yard signs, for literature cards, for mailings. This is how you knock on a door. All of those things that, unless you've ever done this, you have no appreciation for it. And I would say this, I have a much greater appreciation today for anybody, regardless of party, who does this. Everybody should be commended, our political servants, David included, who's done this, because it is a taxing job. You lose your anonymity to some degree, and you have to be out there doing this every single day. I know that November the 8th is coming up. It'll be here before we know it. And I just hope that I leave no stone unturned between now and then, and now on election day. That's what I've learned.
And it is just like the military, you've made many sacrifices in your military career, I'm sure. Leaving family at home and deploying. The same thing is true with being in public office. You make a lot of sacrifices, and you got to be willing to make those sacrifices for the people you represent. So I'm sure you can handle it. There shouldn't be any problem. Thank you, Dave, for joining us tonight. I think you have shown us that you can bring a lot of skill sets to the position, and we look forward to further talking to you about other parts of your platform, your principles, and anything else you would like to talk about. So thank you, Dave, for being here tonight and joining Watch Kansas.
You bet. Thank you so much. It's a great opportunity.
Welcome, Watch Kansas. I'm David French, the state representative for the 40th District. And I'm joined today by Dave Beeler, who is running for that position since I'm retiring this year.
I'm Dave Beeler. I'm running for Kansas House of Representatives for the 40th District. And my wife Lisa and I came to this community in 1984 and raised our family here and have been a part of this community, Leavenworth and Lansing, since then. And what is unique, maybe a little bit about me, is the fact that I spent 36 years working for Hallmark Cards, 25 years of which was here in the Leavenworth community. The second part of that, though, is my Navy career. Commissioned as an ensign in 1994 and just retired as a captain in 2020, May of 2020. And for those of you who may be interested in what a captain is in the Navy, as opposed
It's not an Army captain.
It's not an Army captain. No, it's a big captain. And so it's the
colonel equivalent in the Army.
Colonel equivalent, or as we say, a colonel is a captain equivalent in my service.
Oh, okay.
So again, there's the Hallmark experience, there's a Navy experience, but being part of this community, for me, this is where my family grew up. But in the course of the last 36 years, I was on the Alliance Against Family Violence's board of directors for a total of 14 years, I think. Also on the St. Francis de Sales Pastoral Council and Finance Committee for about 10 years. And when my kids were little, I coached them in every sport they were in, and I'll say this again, except basketball, because I'm a terrible basketball player and I'm not very tall. And then, of course, was also involved in scouting with my two sons. So that commitment to this community is what I bring, and then I bring with that my Hallmark and my Navy experience. So that's me.
That's you. That sounds like quite a resume you have there.
I'm Dave Beeler. I'm running for Kansas House of Representatives for the 40th District. And my wife Lisa and I came to this community in 1984 and have been a part of this community, Leavenworth and Lansing, since then. And what is unique, maybe a little bit about me, is the fact that I spent 36 years working for Hallmark Cards. The second part of that, though, is my Navy career. Commissioned as an ensign in 1994 and just retired as a captain in 2020, May of 2020. And for those of you who may be interested in what a captain is in the Navy, as opposed
It's not an Army captain.
It's not an Army captain. No, it's the
colonel equivalent in the Army.
Colonel equivalent. But being part of this community, for me, this is where my family grew up, and we raised our kids. They went to Lansing High School.
And you have how many kids?
I have 3 children. All of them are adults. Have two granddaughters from my daughter. But in the course of the last 36 years, I was on the Alliance Against Family Violence's board of directors for a total of 14 years, I think.
That's good.
I think my service with the Alliance ended with my last deployment to Kuwait. Also on the St. Francis de Sales Pastoral Council and Finance Committee for about 10 years. And when my kids were little, I coached them in every sport they were in, except basketball. And of course was also involved in scouting with my two sons. So that commitment to this community is what I bring, and then I bring with that my Hallmark and my Navy experience.
Good evening, Watch Kansas. This is Representative David French, and I'm here with Dave Beeler, who is running for state representative for the 40th District. I'm the current representative, and Dave will be replacing me, we hope. Right now, I'm looking forward to turning the position over to Dave. He seems to be a well-qualified candidate, and I think he'll do a great job in the legislature. One of the many questions, Dave, that new candidates for public office get is, why are you running? Because there's many reasons why people run for public office, but each one is probably a little different. And I know for me, when I first ran, it was the fact that our taxes were just raised in 2017. And Linda and I are fixed income. I said we can't afford to keep the current state representative, so I ended up running when I couldn't find anybody else to run. So I ran because of the high taxes, but I know that may not be the reason why you're running. So if you can kind of give us an idea of what caused you to want to run for this position.
Sure, and taxes are important to me, and I hear that all the time when I'm out talking to voters. But I would go back to about July of last year, 2021, and on two separate occasions. It was last summer anyway. One occasion, Marcus Major, who is now a Lansing city councilman, was driving through the neighborhood. He saw me mowing my yard, and he was in his truck. He stopped, rolled down the window, and that was probably the first conversation that I'd had, a serious conversation I'd had with someone who was running for office. And at that time, I was asking Marcus why he was doing it. And what came back to me was his passion and the commitment to the community, but his desire to help lead the city in a new direction, in a fresh direction. Not necessarily a condemnation about those who'd been there before, but that passion and commitment that he felt to use his skills in that regard. The second one was, again, last summer, two ladies rang my doorbell one day. Turned out they were Mary Wood and Amy Bauer-Covey, who were running for the Lansing School Board. And again, in years past, I would have, maybe had a 20 or 30-second conversation with the individuals, but I had a long discussion with both of them. They talked to me about the issues that were important to them in education, in our school system, about the role and the rights of the parent, the welfare of children, and their passion for getting in the race for school board. Quite frankly, they fired me up a little bit about, this is something at some point in my life I could do. It was not something that I had honestly put in my check off my list as soon as I retire. But when the opportunity presented itself, when you and I had a discussion, when you were contemplating not running again, and I looked at what's going on in our community, in our state, from inflation to energy to property taxes, all of those things combined, and I kind of reflect back on the conversations that I had with Marcus and Mary and Amy, it was, I've got the leadership skills to do this.
Right.
I just closed down my Navy career and had an opportunity to continue to use those leadership skills, and that's precisely why I'm doing it. It's not for the pay. It's not for any of those things that go along with it. It is an opportunity to use those leadership skills for the betterment of this community and in the state. And so, if I could shorten that, I would, but that's the reason I'm doing this.
And as a Navy officer, you serve for something greater than yourself. And that is, I think, what you still want to do. You still want to serve for something that is better than just for yourself. If you could retire now, you could have a life and not worry about anything else. But the thing is, you still want to serve other people, and that's what I think is really driving you to do this.
Absolutely.
And I think we can all appreciate that. Again, I went back to, my main issue was taxes when I ran, and I think today, more than ever, the average Kansan is more concerned about taxes than ever before. We are just being taxed to death, and we're losing people every day from the state because people just can't afford to live here anymore. Our sales taxes are outrageous. Property taxes seem to be going up, not just a little bit every year, but 10, 15% a year. And somebody on fixed incomes like my wife and me, we just can't afford to live here anymore. So if you can just give us an idea of how you feel about how we can handle this issue of raising property taxes, or any of the taxes as far as that goes within our state. It is just becoming overwhelming for so many Kansans.
It certainly is. And I will tell you that when I go out and knock on doors and talk to voters, and one of the questions that I'll ask sometimes is, what's top of mind for you as a voter? And one of the things that invariably comes back, if it's not the economy or inflation, it is taxes, and property taxes is a big one in this community. And then if you stand back and take a look at the state, and you look at population changes, Kansas is a negative migration state. We've lost more people due to our taxation. And there's a couple of things. Property taxes is one. So what I am doing, I am learning to educate myself on the process of property taxation. And there is no silver bullet that a legislator can fire to make the issue magically disappear or go away. It takes the cooperation between the state, the county, and the local municipalities working together to understand that you've got a problem, and then working together to hold those taxes in check. The other thing that is important with regard to taxation is it's not just a property tax. It is, as you mentioned, it's food taxes, it's sales taxes on everything else. It is taxation on retiree income. So again, talking about the reason people leave Kansas once their working careers are done, they leave Kansas because we tax their 401ks and their retirement funds. There are a growing number of states in this country. Florida is one. I think Iowa is another one that has or recently signed legislation to exempt retiree income. Those are the things we need. We need the consumers in the state. We need them here for our tax base, and we want them here. They've brought their working experiences. They make our communities richer. We need to incent those individuals to stay here. So property taxes is one, but I think we have to look at the broad spectrum of all taxes and make sure that collectively, is this the best we can do for Kansas? And then we work our way around each of those things to make it better for the constituents that we have.
Yeah, my time in the legislature, I know we've done a lot, I think, to help with the tax situation. We've made the property tax process a lot more transparent, where those taxing entities have to now tell the taxpayer that they're going to get their taxes raised, and how much, and what for. Before, you just got a bill in the mail, and this is what you owe the city or the school board or whatever. So I think we've helped in that situation. We also this year passed the reduction of our food sales tax to down to zero. From the state perspective, in 3 years, starting in January of next year, it's going to be reduced by 2.5%, and then 2% the following year, 2% the year after that. And from the state perspective, that 6.5% will come off the sales tax for food. You're still going to have the county and cities taking their 3% or whatever, but it will be a major reduction in the consumer's sales tax. So we've made progress, but we still have a lot of progress to go in the legislature. So do you have any specific proposals right now that you would like to see the legislature work on your first 2 years?
From a taxation standpoint, there needs to be a comprehensive review of expenditures. So when you look at where the money goes, whether it's education being the largest one in the state, Department of Agriculture, all of those entities that we spend money on, we have an obligation to the taxpayer to make sure that we understand where the money is going. If and when there is wasteful spending, we need to figure out ways to reduce spending or keep the expenditures in check. And again, I would go back to in this regard, my experiences at Hallmark primarily. Budgeting is a big deal in a private corporation. You cannot just continue to raise your budget, your operating budget every year, or you'll go out of business. And in the state, we cannot just continue to raise our budget at the expense of the taxpayer, or what will happen is precisely what is happening today. We are losing more people in the state than we're gaining from a population standpoint because of the tax policies. So I would say let's start with those known programs, look at it on the expenditure side, and the other side of that is to some degree it's the regulations the regulatory side of doing government and business, and then also any licensing fees. All of those things that create revenue for the state need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed with respect to the bigger pie of money that's actually going out and to conduct and fund the business for the state of Kansas.
You know right now that the state is very well off as far as our budget goes, our revenues. We have over $1 billion extra that we have, and people think that's great, except for the fact that where did that $1 billion come from? It came from taxpayers like you and me. So it's the state's doing real well, but you and I not so well. Our savings accounts and our budgets have been hit by the taxes that are being forced upon us by the government. So you're right. Anything the government gets, they're going to spend, and then after they spend it all, they're going to want more, and they'll come back to you and want more money. So it's very important, I think, that the legislature really focuses on trying to control government spending.
Absolutely.
And buying, going for just what the state really needs versus what some of the people in the state think we want, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
that's the way businesses work.
absolutely. I mean, that's the free market system. Is you have to have a balanced budget, and you have to, if you charge too much, you will go out of business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm taking your thunder away from you, but anything more you want to say about taxes?
No, I think it's one of those things we have to recognize that the voters expect us to be vigilant with their money. We all are contributors through the tax dollars that we pay, but every voter wants to know that whether it's tax dollars spent on education or any social programs, that those monies are used wisely.
Right.
So there is that responsibility that we, as whether it's a legislative body or just the state of Kansas, any money that's collected needs to be used wisely, and it needs to be used for the right priorities for the state. I guess that's what I would add to that.
Very good, and I totally agree with you. So thank you again, Dave, for sharing your feelings and your thoughts about taxes in this state. I think that will be one of your priorities when you get to the House, to try to help us reduce those taxes on our taxpayers, because we want to keep Kansans here.
Glad to do it. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Representative David French from the 40th District, representing Watch Kansas tonight. And I'm with Dave Beeler, who is running for that seat this year, as I'm retiring and getting out of the legislature. Dave, I know you've been out knocking on doors and talking to your future constituents, and I think what you've learned, at least I think you've learned, is that most people are really concerned about the inflation right now. You cannot go to fill up your car, you can't go to the grocery store, you can't go out to eat without seeing the prices just skyrocketing out of control. And for most of us, our salaries or our income isn't going up nearly fast enough to cover it. So I think we need to, I think a lot of it has to do with government spending. Especially at the federal level. After COVID, we saw so much money being dumped on the economy that it's overheated our economy to a degree that the debt is just basically killing our economy. So I'm not sure how much we can do at the state level, but I know there's some things we can do to try to control government spending, even at the state level. And so if I'd kind of like you to maybe talk about what you can do at the state level to help this inflation, in spite of the fact that most of it's being caused by the federal government. And you can talk about that too.
Sure. So I think the way I would position this is it's first off, let's take a look at what the classic definition of inflation is. It's too much money chasing too few goods. And as you mentioned, David, when you look at the American Recovery Act or all the other programs that the federal government has dumped into the economy over the last 2+ years, we have a predictable outcome.
Absolutely.
When you pump that much money into the economy, what's going to happen is record level inflation. So that's one side of it. There is another side though that impacts, or Kansas plays a part in, and if you look at, and again it started at the federal level, but there's an impact in the state, and that is the war on fossil fuels. So first part of the Biden administration, they declared war on the fossil fuel industry. And I look around at the clothes I'm wearing, the clothes you're wearing, the shirts, the clothes, whatever, are made with petroleum-based products. We look at the asphalt that goes on our streets. We look at the power that it takes to heat and cool homes. We look at the fuel that we put in our car. We look at the fertilizers that our farmers are putting on their fields and their crops to raise food for us. All of those things, when you declare war on the fossil fuel industry, it choked the supply down. They canceled leases and those kind of things. But the result was very predictable. And when you add the government spending to the war on fossil fuels, we have inflation levels that we haven't seen since Jimmy Carter was president. And it was perfectly predictable. Anybody who thinks that it's somebody else's fault needs to look at those two things. This was a self-inflicted wound. So for us, then it is, okay, what do you do about it? So in Kansas, we are a large producer of natural gas and petroleum in the petroleum industry. We need to make sure that when the first thing is, and let's put spending aside, we need to make sure that the regulations that are affecting those businesses and those industry are as least restrictive as possible, that they promote the spirit of capitalism, and that they promote businesses to be able to do their jobs as efficiently as possible and produce the products. When you do that, then businesses have an opportunity to reduce the costs that are subsequently passed on to consumers. That's a big one. Second thing is, we have to look at expenditures at all levels, but let's focus on the state. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but there are ways to reduce spending. You have to establish what your priorities are, and you have to look at it in the big picture. This is the balanced budget. This is where we're going to impact or affect Kansans' lives the most. Those are the things that we have to do. One of the other things that we've talked about is the proposal to eliminate retiree incomes, taxes on retirees' income. Those are a combination of things that we can do to make this problem more palatable. The challenge will be is that there's no, again, this is one of those things where there's not a silver bullet or a magic fix that we can turn on overnight, but we have to have the discipline to work within ourselves to make those things happen, because they will. They'll get better over time if we do that. And then I would say this, I think we have to look at who caused the problem, and I would challenge all voters, recognize that when you go to the polls in the fall, that what we're seeing inflation was caused by one party, and it was a self-inflicted wound. And we can fix that, and we can fix it at the polls. That's what I would say is the first step.
And you talk about the other side, and they are all for this developing alternative forms of energy, and the idea that they can replace fossil fuels within a certain time frame. And you just mentioned the fact that right now we use fossil fuels for just about everything, and so we're not going to replace fossil fuels. And if we do, we need to do it intelligently, and with proper research. So I think you would agree that. What's your opinion about the
Green New Deal?
Well, maybe not the Green New Deal, but just the availability and the possibilities of alternative fuel means.
Good question. So today, less than 2% of the power that's created in this country comes from wind and solar. And those are the two sources that's touted by the current administration as the road to the transition. Technically, it's not feasible to use just those two sources to replace fossil fuels. It's not possible. So, I'm not saying that doesn't mean we shouldn't look for cleaner, greener sources of energy. We should include all, whether it's petroleum, natural gas, wind, solar, nuclear. That becomes a strategic energy independence plan, and that's what I believe in and what I would support. To just champion solar and wind as the way to the transition to the next source of energy is scientifically not possible at this point. It's not scientifically possible. So let's get behind and get together on an energy independence goal, and let's look at all of those sources of fuel that makes the best sense for America and the best sense for Kansas. We will all be better off if we do that.
I totally agree with you. I think that's key. We need to have the full toolbox of energy sources to make our lives as comfortable as we can, and so we can't just push one off and say we don't need it. We need to look at everything. I totally agree. We don't need to just say, no, we're stuck with fossil fuels forever. There's other ways, nuclear, there's just so many other ways we could get power, but we can't just say, no, we're going to eliminate one of our tools out of our toolbox. That just makes no sense at all, especially right now when it's the primary way we get our energy.
Like inflation, that would be another self-inflicted gunshot.
It would.
Yeah.
I talked to you before about the fact that I ran initially because of taxes. Our taxes were so high. And part of that was that our taxes were too high and because the government spending was out of control in the state. And so I went to Topeka to basically try to cut taxes. Well, I have to admit tonight that I failed miserably. The 4 years I was in Topeka, every year we set a new spending record in the state. I don't know if that was my fault particularly. I don't think it was, because I was definitely looking for ways to cut spending, but it was definitely the fault of a tax and spend governor who just, every budget she submitted to us was several $100 million more. And eventually, you start adding that much to the budget, then guess what? You come back to the taxpayer and they have to pay for the bill. So I hope you're more successful than I've been in cutting the spending. There is a lot of spending at the state level we can cut. And so Dave, when you get there next year, for all of our sakes, I hope you can do something with the budgets.
I will do that. I will also, I'm going to try to quote Ronald Reagan here. The 9 most feared words in the English language. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. We need to recognize that government in and of itself is an inefficient way to do business. There's no incentive for the government to be efficient. We must elect people who are charged with making our government efficient. That's the only way we're going to get there. So, and I will do my best, David.
Very well said. Thank you very much, Dave, for joining us. And thank you.
Thanks. First off, let's take a look at what the classic definition of inflation is. It's too much money chasing too few goods. And as you mentioned, David, when you look at the American Recovery Act or all the other programs that the federal government has dumped into the economy, over the last 2+ years, we have a predictable outcome. When you
Absolutely.
pump that much money into the economy, what's going to happen is record level inflation. So that's one side of it. There is another side though that impacts, or Kansas plays a part in, and if you look at, and again it started at the federal level, but there's an impact in the state, and that is the war on fossil fuels. So first part of the Biden administration, they declared war on the fossil fuel industry. And I look around at the clothes I'm wearing, the clothes you're wearing, the shirts, the clothes, whatever, are made with petroleum-based products. We look at the asphalt that goes on our streets. We look at the power that it takes to heat and cool homes. We look at the fuel that we put in our car. We look at the fertilizers that our farmers are putting on their fields and their crops to raise food for us. All of those things, when you declare war on the fossil fuel industry, it choked the supply down. They canceled leases and those kind of things. But the result was very predictable. And when you add the government spending to the war on fossil fuels, we have inflation levels that we haven't seen since Jimmy Carter was president.